The morning fog hung over Omaha like a blanket of unfinished dreams, and Warren Buffett stepped out of his modest sedan into the parking lot of Children's Hospital with the same quiet deliberation he brought to everything else in his life. 89, his movements carried the careful precision of a man who had learned that rushing rarely improved outcomes. The hospital visit wasn't on any public calendar. It never was. For 37 years he had made this monthly journey, always alone, always unannounced. As he walked toward the hospital entrance, something caught his eye. A folded piece of paper was tucked under his windshield wiper, fluttering slightly in the October breeze. Warren paused, his weathered hand reaching for the note with the same curiosity that had driven him to read every annual report, every financial statement, every piece of information that crossed his desk for the better part of 7 decades. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. The paper was torn from what looked like a child's notebook, complete with margin lines and 3-hole punches. Warren unfolded it carefully, as if handling something precious. "Mr. Buffett, I don't know if this will reach you, but I had to try. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 34. And I'm raising my 6-year-old daughter Emma alone. She's been fighting leukemia for 2 years. The treatments are working, but the bills, they're drowning us. I've sold everything I own. I work 3 jobs. I've asked everyone I know for help. I'm not asking for money. I know you must get thousands of requests like this. I just wanted to tell you that your letters to shareholders have been the only thing keeping me sane during the hardest nights. When Emma can't sleep because of the pain, I read them to her. She doesn't understand the business stuff, but she loves the stories about your childhood, about patience, about believing in tomorrow even when today is hard. There's one line you wrote that we repeat together. Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. Emma made me promise that when she gets better, not if, when, we'll plant a tree together. She wants to plant it for some other kid who might need shade someday. I guess I just wanted you to know that your words matter to people you'll never meet. Thank you for planting trees. Marcus Chen, apartment 4B, 2247 Dodge Street. Warren read the note twice, then a third time. The words seemed to settle into his chest like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples he couldn't quite name. He looked back at his car, a 2014 Cadillac DTS he'd driven for over a decade, the same model he'd owned since 2006. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. But somehow, this Marcus Chen had recognized it, had known it belonged to him. The hospital lobby buzzed with its usual morning activity. Nurses changing shifts, families clutching coffee cups like lifelines, children in wheelchairs being pushed toward treatment rooms with the weary courage that broke and remade hearts in equal measure. Warren had walked these halls for so long that the staff barely noticed him anymore, which was exactly how he preferred it. He made his way to the 3rd floor, to the pediatric oncology wing, where he'd been volunteering for 37 years. Not as Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, but simply as Warren, the quiet man who read stories to sick children, who remembered their names and their favorite books, who showed up month after month with a consistency that had become its own form of medicine. But today, the familiar routine felt different. Marcus Chen's words echoed in his mind as he passed room after room of children fighting battles they never should have had to face. Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. He'd written those words in a shareholder letter 15 years ago, but he'd never imagined them being whispered in a darkened hospital room by a father trying to give his daughter hope. Warren found himself standing outside room 312, where 8-year-old Tyler was recovering from his latest round of chemotherapy. Through the window, he could see the boy's mother, Sarah, reading from a worn paperback while Tyler dozed fitfully. Sarah worked the night shift at a nearby diner, Warren knew, and spent her days here surviving on vending machine coffee and the kind of determination that should have been bottled and sold as medicine. He knocked softly and entered. Sarah looked up, her tired eyes brightening with the kind of genuine warmth that had nothing to do with who he was and everything to do with the simple fact that he cared enough to show up. "Warren," she said softly, careful not to wake Tyler. "I wasn't sure if you'd make it this month." "Wouldn't miss it," he replied, settling into the chair beside Tyler's bed with the ease of long practice. "How's our champion doing?" "Better. The doctors are optimistic about this round. He's been asking about you, wants to know if you'll read the next chapter of Charlotte's Web." Warren nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, thinking about another child, another parent, another family facing the same impossible choices. "Sarah," he said quietly, "do you know a man named Marcus Chen? His daughter Emma?" Sarah's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I know Emma. She's on the 4th floor. Sweet little girl, 6 years old. Her father, he's been struggling." "Why do you ask?" Warren reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the note, handing it to Sarah. She read it slowly, her eyes filling with tears by the time she reached the end. "He left this on my car this morning," Warren said. "I don't think he expected me to actually read it." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Marcus is a good man, Warren. He's been coming here for 2 years, always alone, always trying to stay strong for Emma. The other parents, we try to help each other out, share information, support each other. But Marcus, he keeps to himself. I think he's ashamed that he can't do more for his daughter." Warren was quiet for a long moment, watching Tyler sleep. The boy's face was pale from treatment, but peaceful. Outside the window, October leaves were beginning to turn, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson that reminded Warren of autumn afternoons from his childhood in Omaha, when the biggest worry was whether he'd have enough time to finish his paper route before dark. "Tell me about Emma," he said finally. Sarah's expression softened. "She's remarkable. 6 years old, but she has this wisdom about her. I think it comes from facing something so serious so young. She draws pictures for the other kids, always checks on the younger ones when she's feeling well enough. Last week, she gave Tyler one of her coloring books because she noticed he was scared before his procedure. And her father? He works himself to the bone. I've seen him here at 3 a.m. after finishing a shift at the warehouse, then leaving at 6 to get to his morning job at the convenience store. He reads to her, talks to her about the future, about college, about all the things they'll do when she's better. He never talks about if, it's always when." Warren nodded slowly. He understood that kind of faith, the kind that wasn't based on certainty, but on the simple refusal to accept defeat. It was the same faith that had carried him through the early days of his investing career, when people thought he was crazy for buying stocks in companies everyone else was abandoning. "The tree," Warren said, more to himself than to Sarah. "What tree?" "In the note. Emma wants to plant a tree when she gets better. For some other child who might need shade someday." Sarah smiled through her tears. "That sounds like Emma." Warren stood up, his mind already working through possibilities, connections, solutions, but not in the way people might expect from one of the world's wealthiest men. He wasn't thinking about grand gestures or public donations. He was thinking about a father who worked 3 jobs and still found time to read shareholder letters to his sick daughter. He was thinking about a 6-year-old girl who wanted to plant trees for strangers. "I need to make a phone call," he said to Sarah. "Will you tell Tyler I'll be back to read that chapter tomorrow?" Warren walked to the hospital's meditation room, a small, quiet space with comfortable chairs and soft lighting that had become his thinking place over the years. He pulled out his phone, an old flip model that drove his assistants crazy but served his purposes perfectly, and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Good morning, Warren," came the familiar voice of Dr. Patricia Weiss, the hospital's head of pediatric oncology. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. Patricia, I need to understand something about patient care here, specifically about the families who are struggling financially." There was a pause. "Warren, you know I can't discuss specific patients without—" "I'm not asking for confidential information. I'm asking about the system. When a family can't afford treatment, what happens?" "We never turn away a child who needs care," Dr. Weiss said carefully. "But the financial burden on families can be devastating. We have social workers who help with insurance, payment plans, connecting families with assistance programs. But the truth is, for many families, even with all the help we can provide, the costs are overwhelming. And these families, they just carry that burden alone? Most of them do, yes. Pride, shame, fear, it all plays a role. They don't want to be seen as charity cases. They want to fight for their children with dignity." Warren was quiet for a moment, thinking about Marcus Chen's note, about the careful way he'd said he wasn't asking for money, just wanted to share gratitude. Pride was something Warren understood deeply. He'd built his entire philosophy around it, not the arrogant kind of pride, but the quiet dignity that came from earning your way, from not asking for more than you'd worked for. Patricia, hypothetically, if someone wanted to help these families without making them feel like charity cases, what would be the most effective way? Dr. Weiss paused. "You're up to something, aren't you?" "I'm always up to something. But this is different." "Well, hypothetically," she said, and Warren could hear the smile in her voice, "the most meaningful help would be the kind that preserves dignity. Maybe something that feels earned rather than given. Something that honors the fight these families are already fighting." After ending the call, Warren sat in the meditation room for another 20 minutes thinking. The afternoon light was beginning to slant through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. He thought about Marcus Chen, working 3 jobs and still taking time to read shareholder letters to his daughter. He thought about Emma, wanting to plant a tree for other children she'd never meet. He thought about all the families he'd encountered, over 37 years of hospital visits, carrying burdens that would have crushed lesser people. By the time Warren left the hospital that day, he had a plan. 3 days later, Marcus Chen was finishing his morning shift at the convenience store when his phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. "Is this Marcus Chen?" The voice was warm, professional. "Yes, this is Marcus. Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Patricia Weiss from Children's Hospital. I'm calling about Emma." Marcus's heart stopped. "Is she okay? Is something wrong?" "Emma is fine," Dr. Weiss said quickly. "Actually, I'm calling with some unusual news. It seems that Emma has been selected for something called the Young Heroes Legacy Scholarship." "The what?" "It's a new program that recognizes children who demonstrate exceptional courage and compassion while facing serious illness. Emma was nominated by several staff members here who were impressed by her kindness toward other patients and her positive attitude despite her own challenges." Marcus felt like he was dreaming. "I don't understand. What kind of scholarship?" "The scholarship covers all medical expenses related to Emma's treatment, as well as a college fund that will be waiting for her when she's ready. But there's also a unique component. Recipients are asked to participate in a special project. Emma has been invited to help plant a memorial garden here at the hospital. Trees and flowers that will provide comfort and shade for future patients and their families." Marcus sat down hard on a milk crate behind the counter. "Dr. Weiss, I don't know what to say. How is this possible?" "Sometimes, Mr. Chen, good things happen to good people. The scholarship is funded by an anonymous donor who believes that heroes come in all sizes, including 6-year-old girls who draw pictures for other sick children. That evening, Marcus sat on Emma's hospital bed, holding the official letter from the Young Heroes Legacy Scholarship Program. Emma was feeling well enough to sit up, her dark eyes bright with excitement as her father read the letter aloud for the 3rd time. "Daddy, does this mean I get to plant the tree?" "It means you get to plant lots of trees, sweetheart. A whole garden." Emma clapped her hands together. "And other kids will get to sit in the shade." Lots of other kids. Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking with the seriousness that had become her trademark. "Daddy, do you think the person who gave us this scholarship knows about our note?" "What note, honey?" "The one you left on that man's car. The one you didn't think I saw you write." Marcus felt his cheeks grow warm. "You saw that?" "I was watching. From the window when you walked to the parking lot. You looked so sad when you came back. But then you smiled when you sat down, like you'd done something that made you feel better." Marcus hugged his daughter close. "Sometimes, Emma, we do things just because they need to be done, not because we expect anything back. Like planting trees. Exactly like planting trees." 2 weeks later, on a crisp November morning, the Memorial Garden groundbreaking ceremony took place in a small courtyard outside the pediatric wing. It was a modest affair, just hospital staff, a few families, and the children who were well, enough to attend. Emma, wearing a yellow dress and a knitted cap to cover her head where hair was slowly growing back, held a small shovel with the same reverence other children might reserve for a favorite toy. Warren Buffett stood at the back of the small crowd, unrecognized in his simple grey sweater and khakis. He watched as Emma carefully placed the first small oak tree into the prepared hole, her father's hands guiding hers as they covered the roots with dark soil. "This tree," Emma announced to the gathered crowd with the confidence of someone who had learned to speak truth clearly, "is for all the kids who will come here after me. When they're scared or tired, they can sit under it and remember that someone else was scared and tired too, but got better." After the ceremony, as families began to disperse, Warren approached Marcus Chen. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Are you Emma's father?" Marcus looked up, his eyes widening as he recognized the familiar face. "Mr. Buffett, I wanted to thank you," Warren said simply. "Thank me?" "Mr. Buffett, I should be thanking you. The scholarship, the garden." "The scholarship came from many sources," Warren said, which was technically true. He had set up a foundation and recruited several other donors to contribute. "But your note, Mr. Chen, reminded me why I write those letters in the first place. Sometimes we forget that words can be investments too." Marcus looked around to make sure Emma was still occupied with the other children, then spoke quietly. Did you have something to do with the scholarship?" Warren smiled. "I had something to do with remembering that the best investments are the ones that compound over generations. Your daughter is going to do remarkable things, Mr. Chen, and someday, when she's grown and successful, she'll remember that people believed in her when she needed it most. That's worth more than any stock dividend." Emma came running over, her cheeks flushed from playing with the other children. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson says there's going to be a plaque by the tree with all our names on it." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Marcus said, then looked back at Warren. "Mr. Buffett, this is my daughter Emma." Emma looked up at Warren with the direct gaze of a child who had learned early that life was both precious and fragile. "Are you the man who writes the letters Daddy reads to me?" "I am," Warren said, kneeling down to her level. "I hear you're quite a reader yourself. Daddy says your letters teach us about being patient and believing in tomorrow. I like the part about trees." "What part about trees?" "About how someone plants them so other people can have shade, even if the person who plants them never gets to sit under them." Warren felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of truth spoken by someone too young to know how profound it was. "That's exactly right, Emma. That's exactly right." As Warren drove home that evening, Marcus Chen's note still tucked in his jacket pocket, he thought about the strange mathematics of kindness, how a desperate father's gratitude could multiply into scholarships for dozens of children, how a 6-year-old's wish to plant a tree could grow into a memorial garden that would comfort families for generations to come. He thought about his own legacy, built over decades of careful investments and patient accumulation of wealth, but the numbers that mattered most couldn't be found on any balance sheet. They were measured in children who would grow up healthy, in families who could sleep at night without the weight of impossible debt, in trees that would provide shade for people not yet born. That night, Warren sat at his desk in the modest house he'd lived in for over 60 years, writing his annual letter to shareholders. But this year the words came differently. Instead of starting with market analysis or economic projections, he found himself writing about a small girl who wanted to plant trees for strangers. To the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway, he began, "This year I want to tell you about the most important investment I've learned about recently. It doesn't trade on any exchange, doesn't pay quarterly dividends, and can't be measured by traditional metrics. But its returns are guaranteed to compound over generations. The investment is in the simple act of believing in tomorrow when today seems impossible. It's the father who works 3 jobs and still finds time to read to his sick child. It's the 6-year-old girl who wants to plant trees for children she'll never meet. It's the quiet faith that drives us to keep building, keep growing, keep planting, even when we can't imagine the shade our efforts might someday provide. Someone's sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago. This year I was reminded that we are all gardeners in ways we might never realize. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every choice to believe in someone else's future, these are the seeds we plant. And while we may never see the full growth of these investments, we can trust that someone, somewhere, will find shade in our small efforts to make tomorrow better than today." 6 months later, Emma Chen was declared cancer-free. The memorial garden had grown to include 23 trees and flowering shrubs, funded by donations that seemed to multiply mysteriously as word spread about the young girl who had wanted to provide shade for other children. Marcus Chen kept Warren's shareholder letters, reading them not for investment advice, but for the stories they told about patience, faith, and the compound returns of human kindness. He never told Emma that Warren Buffett had been at the tree planting ceremony, or that the young hero's legacy scholarship had been created specifically for her. Some gifts, he learned, were meant to be received with the same grace with which they were given, quietly, gratefully, and with the understanding that the most valuable things in life were rarely the ones that came with price tags. Emma kept her promise. Every year, on the anniversary of her final treatment, she and her father planted a new tree somewhere in Omaha. In parks, outside schools, in the yards of families who needed shade. By the time she turned 18 and left for college, fully paid for by the scholarship that had continued to grow through careful management and additional anonymous contributions, she had planted 47 trees across the city. Warren Buffett, now in his mid-90s, still made his monthly visits to Children's Hospital. He still read stories to sick children, still remembered their names and their favorite books, but now he also spent time in the memorial garden, sitting under the oak tree Emma had planted, reading his mail and thinking about the strange mathematics that had brought him to this place. Sometimes nurses would find him there in the early morning, having arrived before dawn to watch the sunrise through the branches of trees planted by children who had faced impossible odds and chosen hope anyway. He never said much during these moments, but staff members often noticed him smiling as he read letters from shareholders or watched through the garden's windows as families found their own moments of peace among the growing trees. On a particularly quiet morning in late spring, Warren sat under Emma's tree, reading a letter from a shareholder in California who had started a similar program at a hospital in Los Angeles after reading about the Young Heroes Legacy Scholarship in the Berkshire Hathaway annual report. The program had already helped 12 families, and the letter included photos of children planting trees in their own memorial garden. Warren folded the letter carefully and looked up through the canopy of leaves above him. In just a few years, Emma's small oak tree had grown tall enough to provide real shade, its branches reaching out in all directions like arms offering embrace. Other children played beneath it now, their laughter mixing with the sound of wind, through leaves and the distant hum of the city beyond the hospital walls. He thought about Marcus Chen's note, still tucked in his desk drawer at home, and about the mysterious way that desperate prayers sometimes found their way to the right hearts at the right moments. He thought about Emma, now studying pre-med at the University of Nebraska, with plans to become a pediatric oncologist, carrying forward the kind of quiet heroism that couldn't be taught in textbooks. Most of all, he thought about trees, how they grew slowly, invisibly, requiring nothing more than time and faith and the occasional nurturing hand. How they provided shade, not just for the people who planted them, but for generations of strangers who would never know the names of those who had prepared the way. Warren Buffett had built an empire based on the patient accumulation of value over time. But sitting in that garden, surrounded by trees planted by children who had faced impossible odds with impossible grace, he understood that his greatest investments had never appeared on any financial statement. They had been measured instead in moments like this, quiet mornings when the shade was perfect and the future felt as certain as the ground beneath his feet. As he prepared to leave, Warren noticed a small piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of his car. For a moment his heart skipped, remembering another note from another desperate parent. But this time, the handwriting was different, rounder, more careful, written in the careful script of someone just learning to form letters. Mr. Buffett. My name is Sophie, and I am 7 years old. My mum says you help kids at the hospital. I wanted to thank you for the trees. I sit under them when I have to wait for my treatments, and they make me feel brave. When I grow up, I want to plant trees too. My mum says you are very smart about money, but I think you are smart about other things too, like how to make people feel less scared. Thank you for the shade. Sophie. P.S. I'm going to get better and plant a tree for you someday. Warren read the note twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in his jacket pocket next to his heart. As he drove away from the hospital, heading home through the familiar streets of Omaha, he found himself thinking not about stock prices or quarterly earnings, but about a 7-year-old girl named Sophie who would someday plant a tree for a man she barely knew, simply because she had learned that kindness, like compound interest, had a way of growing beyond all reasonable expectations. The afternoon light slanted through his windshield, warm and golden, and Warren Buffett smiled, as he realized that some returns couldn't be calculated, only felt. And the feeling, he decided, was worth more than all the wealth he had accumulated in 90-plus years of living. Because in the end, the greatest investments weren't the ones that made money. They were the ones that made shade. Some investments don't show returns on paper, only in people. If this story stayed with you long after the final scene, like the video and subscribe to Panorama Legacy. Every share helps stories like this travel further, to those who need them most. Leave a comment below telling us, what would you write? In a letter if Warren Buffett parked beside you, and if you're ready for another quiet story, one filled with unexpected compassion and choices that ripple through time, click on the next video on your screen, because sometimes the simplest note can move the heart of the world.